Hi everyone, today I'm taking a look at Gutenberg, which is a Euro strategy board game released in 2021 by Grana. This one takes around 90 minutes to play and accommodates 1 to 4 players. Before I get into my review of Gutenberg, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk. If you buy board games and you live in the UK, then Kienda is definitely the place to go. And if you use my discount code in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get into Gutenberg. So the main board for Gutenberg is going to look like this once it's set up, and essentially this board is divided up into 5 different rows, all of which represent a different aspect of the game. So you have the contracts part at the top here, then you have the inks, then you have these speciality cards, then you have these gears, and finally you have these patronage cards at the bottom. Of course, this isn't going to mean anything to you at the moment, but I'll explain the relevance shortly. You're also going to have all these spare cards and gears ready to be used to replenish the board later. You have a bag, which is where the inks are stored, where you, again, use to replenish from. And more importantly, you have your own personal player board, which is going to look a bit like this, where you have the option to store up to 3 gears at any time. You have a track here, or 4 different tracks, all depicting a different speciality. So you've got like your chisels here, you've got your leather work and stuff, and you're going to be using these to monitor how far you've climbed up in each of those specialities. And you also have a little kind of bonus track here as well, and where you can get little bonuses as you climb these other tracks. You can store 4 contracts at any time, which is represented by these little notches in your player board. And you're going to have a number of different sundry things, such as these used gear tokens. You've got a spare cube here, which can be used on the main board. And you're going to have a number of these black cubes, depending on the player order, and your little programming board here, which is a big mechanism in the game. And then you've got your other bits and bobs, such as money and these types, which are these very nice little wooden printing pieces. And then you've got, again, your money and spare types, and even a player screen. But I won't be using the player screen because obviously I don't need it for this video. Each game of Gutenberg is going to play out over 6 rounds, and by the end of those 6 rounds, the player with the most victory points, of course, will be the winner. The first thing you do every single round, apart from the first one, is to rotate any gears that you have on your board. So you might have more than others. You have the capacity to keep up to 3. But again, the first thing you do is you're going to rotate it, as the arrow suggests, into the next third of each gear, which will by default rotate all the other ones as well. And what that will mean is that that's going to change some bonus actions you can take throughout the round, because you can basically activate these anytime by placing one of these used markers on it, which might give you a little boon as you go. But after that's done, you are going to go into the programming phase, where you are going to allocate all these different cubes that you get given at the start of the round onto the different actions that you can take. And if you place more cubes than your opponent, and bearing in mind this is all done secretly and simultaneously behind an action screen, then you are going to break the tie. So let's just say, without thinking too much here, I put all these different cubes like this, bearing in mind that I might really want a specific contract, so I go quite heavily on that one, and maybe I also really want a gear, so I go really heavy on this one. But I am not so fussed about doing a patronage, so I don't put anything on that one. So once everyone's happy with what they've programmed, they're going to reveal it simultaneously, and then you're going to go through all the different phases of the round. So starting with the top and working down, you're going to basically resolve them. Now, if you ever program the exact same as somebody else on a region, then that is going to get broken or determined in player order. So the first thing you're programming is the ability to take one of these contracts. And these contracts actually come in 2 parts. You have the basic part here, which is basically all you need is these certain types in order to fulfill it. So you can see here, I need an A and an I, one of these pieces. And if I did that by the end of the round, when it comes to the contract fulfillment part, you're going to get the reward at the bottom. So you can see here, you get a number of different money, depending on how difficult that is to achieve. But also you come with these embellishment cards, which are basically an improved version of the basic contract. So let's just say, for example, I ended up taking these 2 cards, and once you take them, they're going to get locked in with each other for the rest of the game. But what that means is that if I ended up doing this contract here, but also cash in a blue ink and a yellow ink, I'd get an additional 4 points. And if I did that at the same time I had a level 6 on my ink track, then I'd get another 4 points. And if I did all of them together, I'd get an additional 2 money on top of that. So again, you have those 2 different tiers, or even 3 different tiers on what you want to do. You can do the basic level with 1 embellishment, or the basic level with 2 embellishments to get the additional reward. Once the contracts have been taken, you're going to go into the inks phase, and in this section you are going to claim one of these 3 or 4 different segments depending on the player count, and take a number of inks from that segment. So let's just say I really wanted a red ink. I might say I'll take this one here. Now the first one is going to be free, but anyone after that you have to start paying for. So you could end up taking all 3 of them for 3 money, or maybe you can just take 2 of them for 1 money. However, you cannot jump the queue, so I can't go straight in and buy this one for 2. I have to do them in order. Now if somebody else who goes after me in the ink phase, they can also follow by taking the same section, but of course they'll only be able to start from where I left off. The next phase is the speciality phase, where you're going to claim one of these speciality cards and climb up the corresponding amount on your player board. So let's just say I broke the tie, I went really heavy on one of these, so I ended up taking these chisel speciality, then I'd climb up twice on that chisel track, like so. Now whenever your first speciality reaches a certain level, so you can see here, as soon as I reach level 2, I will move this one up to the next one and take an ink of my choice from the bag. The same applies when it goes to level 4. When it goes to level 5, you can take a free contract, and when it goes to level 6, you can take a type of your choice. Additionally, at the end of the game, depending on how high you climb up these tracks, you can get a bonus amount of victory points. The next phase is the ability to take these gears and add them onto your player board. So you can either put them in an empty space, or you can replace an existing one. So let's just say, for example, I ended up taking, let's say this one here. I put it on my player board any way I like. Let's say I did that, like so, putting it in the highlighted area. And again, that will give me the bonus ability to do that when I like, any time during the round. Now, additionally, if I ended up putting at least 1 cube in the gear section, then I can actually just take one of my gears that I haven't used yet and rotate it any orientation I like to maybe keep using the same ability. But of course, that is going to take one of those bidding cubes in order to do that. And these gears give you lots of different bonuses, such as being able to buy types at a discount. And whenever you complete a contract with a certain type in it, then you get a few bonus points. Climbing up tracks on your specialities, getting bonus points when you fulfill certain contracts with the specialities on them, and so on. And the final segment is the patronage board at the bottom here, where you can have the option to do 2 different things. So the first thing is to take one of these bonuses here. Now when you do that, you are simply going to put your action cube on one of these spots, which will either be to take a new contract, to climb up a track of your choice, to gain 3 coins from the bank, or to take 2 inks of your choice. But additionally, as the game goes on, when you get to round 3, you can start claiming these patronage cards, which are basically more elaborate contracts or more difficult contracts to complete. So you can see here, if I get my or this symbol on my speciality track up to level 4, and I cash in 2 red inks, then I can take this card here, and these cards are going to be worth 8 points each at the end of the round. So they are quite powerful and a good way of gaining points. Now, when you have the types on them, or the speciality numbers on them, then you do not actually have to cash anything in, you just need to have them. However, when you have the inks, you do need to actually physically discard them in order to complete that patronage card. So once all those 5 different phases have been resolved and you've used any bonus actions that you want to on your gears, again by placing one of these use markers on them, then you're going to go into the kind of contract fulfillment part, where you can allocate all the different resources you've collected onto the different contracts. So again, if you have all the typefaces, you can shove them on here to try and, again, get them completed, and discarding inks and stuff. Now, what is important though, at any time during the round, you can spend money to get new types, because of course you want to get more types to get the more difficult contracts and the bigger rewarded contracts complete. And to do that, it's going to cost you a number of coins depending on how many of these types you already have. So in order to buy, say, your 5th type, you are going to have to spend 5 coins, and then 6 coins, and so on. So it gets more and more expensive the more of these types that you collect. And you can also see here that these contracts don't only offer you points and coins, they can also give you bonuses such as gaining new contracts or gaining bonus inks. And as I said earlier, after the end of 6 rounds, the player who's gained the most victory points, either from completed contracts, from these patronage cards, and from any points during the round, will be declared the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Gutenberg, which I have to say was definitely one of my most anticipated games of 2021. I really like the idea and premise of this game, and there were certainly some features that stood out to me that piqued my interest. One thing I was somewhat apprehensive about was the contract fulfillment part, because generally I'm not a huge fan of that mechanism. I think it's a bit done to death. You know, collect this and cash it in for X reward. But I like this idea, and I was definitely willing to look past that because of this 2 or 3 tier reward system, where you could do it basically, you know, just do a quick grab, really, do a basic contract and get a quick points grab or money grab. Or you could invest a bit in your ability to do these to a higher level. You know, are you going to collect the inks and get this amount of rewards, or these bonus points, or are you going to wait until you've climbed up these tracks to fill in the contract to get those rewards, or do them both for the additional bonus or reward? So that's really cool. That's a really good idea to spice up the whole contract thing. However, I do have to say that from my experience, it always seems like people will play the contracts to the maximum reward anyway. I don't think it even happened once where players took a basic cash out and they always went all in on their contracts. Now, maybe that's not an optimal strategy. It's just something I noticed when I played this one. Now, I suppose the rest of the game is pretty straightforward, you know, grabbing the inks. However, it does have that idea of, or am I going to buy up to here and leave this one vulnerable to somebody else to take? Am I going to go all in and grab them all? And these ones as well, just basic track climbing. However, there will often be times where you are really desperate to climb a certain track quicker because you have a, you know, really valuable contract just sat there waiting to be cashed in, but you're just not quite high enough up on that track. So there might be a really big desire to grab that. And additionally, you want to climb up these tracks quicker because you can get these bonuses as well. And the earlier you do them, of course, the better, because you get like a free typeface and stuff. And also to get the dividends from climbing the tracks and the in-game scoring. Now, the gear part of the game was certainly one of the factors that piqued my interest the most about this, because I really do feel like gears are a massively unexplored area of gaming. There's just so much you could do there, and I think there's still so much more room for creativity. However, I do feel like this game wasn't terribly interesting in the way that these gears were used, because most of the abilities are pretty minor. Don't get me wrong, they are certainly useful, and you can obviously trigger them at any time, and doing it at the best time is, you know, if you do it carefully, that can pull you ahead. But I just thought that the way these interlocked and things could have been taken to another level. I never really felt that puzzle of having to line things up carefully to get the maximum out of them. It just kind of felt like, well, this is the area in the highlighted area, so I'll just use it when I use it. Again, I didn't really feel like I needed to, you know, stress over lining it up to be optimal as possible. And the bottom part of the board here is pretty standard stuff. There is actually quite a good competition to get here, especially in the earlier part of the game, because getting 2 inks of your choice or climbing up any track, that's quite a nice little bonus to have. And of course, the desperation to get these done, because these are, you know, a good offering of points, but you need to beat your opponents to the punch. And that all ties back to this programming system, which I have to say is definitely by far my favourite part of the game. The idea that you have to very carefully plan things out. You know, what are people going to go for? How much do I need to bid in order to beat people to the punch and you know, be first player in that particular part of the game? You know, maybe I really want a certain gear. Maybe I really want a blue ink, and there's only one up there, so I need to make sure I've got a lot of cubes in there to do that. However, to do something, I'm going to have to forsake something else. And I really do think like the designers have done a great job here of offering players the right amount of cubes in order to play with. Because again, if you want to go heavy in on one, then you might even have to go without anything at all in one of the action pools. So yeah, I really like the way that's done. You have to get into your opponent's head. You want to try and win it, but not overbid, because that definitely happened a few times. You know, you're thinking that everybody wants the same ink you do. You end up putting a bunch of cubes in that area and nobody went for the ink section at all, essentially meaning that you've wasted all those programming actions. So yeah, although it's a very simple game in all of the different kind of elements of it, the way it's tied together with this really clever system, again, I think that's a very good move. It seemed to me that the game is pretty well balanced. You know, are you going to full on spam the contract as much as you can, or are you going to build towards the you know, the patronage cards? It really didn't seem like there's an optimal way to play there, which is nice. And there's even some cool benefits you can get from the gears, such as when you trigger them, they give you an amount of points based on the round that you're in. I think the time investment for Gutenberg is generally okay. I mean, you are going to get this done quite comfortably under 90 minutes or 90 minutes or under with 2 or 3 players. You might be looking at a little bit longer than that when you are playing with the full 4 players, which does feel a little bit overkill for me, because it's not a terribly involved or complex game. And if you are starting to, go beyond 90 minutes, you might want a little bit more meat on the bones than what Gutenberg offers. But despite that, you are generally involved in the gameplay most of the time. After the programming phase, which is done simultaneously anyway, yes, some people might take longer than others, but it's not going to be too bad. All the different segments of the game are resolved quite quickly. Just grab a few contracts, choose which speciality card you want, choose what gear card you want. There really isn't that, potential to have long, drawn-out turns, and it generally does tick along at quite a good pace. One of my biggest concerns about the game is the lack of replayability. You're pretty much going to do the same thing game after game here. Yes, the patronage cards are going to change ever so slightly. There's going to be a different array of cards on display, different contracts to work towards, but generally you are going to feel like you're doing the same thing. There's only a few paths to victory. And there are little ways you can spice the game up by using these player powers to make you different from the other players, but still I don't think that's going to be enough to. There is some good degree of player interaction here, mostly because of this programming system. That's certainly the interaction I enjoy the most in the game. However, there is some good competition in terms of getting your upgrades as quick as possible to try and claim these patronage cards and stuff like that. But generally, the best bit of interaction for me is the way that you program your own board. I'm very happy with the production for this game. I think it looks great when it's on the table. I think the board looks really good with all this kind of paper and tools draped all over it. Nice clear iconography, like crystal clear. No complaints there at all. All the cardboard pieces are good and the gears fit on the board quite nicely. You do have to use a bit of force to force these little wooden cylinders into the player board, but that's no real big issue. The cards are a little bit flimsy, but they are this long type, so it's not really an issue. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm happy with the production, especially when it comes to these wooden types that you can collect. These are great to handle. They're very tactile, and they just add a bit more to the atmosphere of the game. It's also a nice touch that the game does offer these nice little component pots to store all your different bits and bobs in. The game also scales pretty well. With 3 players, you're going to have a spot here that's not used to keep things tighter. And when you play with 2 players, you do play on the reverse side of the board to, again, limit the amount of spaces available. But because of that, the programming bit still does come through. But I do prefer it when it's 3 players, really, because you do have to think, again, an extra layer and not just beat one person in terms of your bids. Okay, so let's go into my final thoughts for Gutenberg. And I have to be completely honest here, and maybe this is due to lack of research on my part, but this is a way more straightforward and simple and lighter game than I was expecting it to be. Now, I'm not going to say that's a negative thing, because I certainly don't have anything against lighter games. I have a lot of them. However, when you are wanting a simple, light contract fulfillment game like Gutenberg is, I probably want it to be 45 to 60 minutes in length. This one you are looking at 90 minutes to 120 minutes at the full player count. And I do think that's a little bit long for what this game offers in return for that. And I also think that there's some good ideas here, and I also think there's some missed opportunities. The gear system was a little bit lacking for me. I didn't find the rewards terribly interesting. And the 2-tiered system, maybe they could have gone an extra layer with that in terms of, the pairing of the contracts. But I certainly don't think that's a negative thing. I think it's a nice touch. But without a doubt, my favourite part of the game is this programming thing. It's such a creative way to determine player order and, kind of racking your brain over what you're going to prioritise, what do I need as an essential, what can I neglect this round. That is definitely the part of the game that I enjoyed the most. And I'm not even upset that the rest of the game is so simple, because often I like simple games when they are tied together with a clever mechanism holding it all together. And I think this game almost pulls it off. But I think the overall experience and the takeaway, the strategy and the depth of the game is just a little bit less than what I'm looking for right now for my own collection. Now, if I'm thinking objectively and I want to kind of introduce people to a lot of Euro game mechanisms, take that contract level or contract fulfillment to the next level, then I would say, give Gutenberg a go, because it's certainly a decent game. It's, mechanically everything works as it should. There's some good decisions here, but there's not those great crunchy, paralyzing decisions that I tend to like. Again, especially when it comes to a game that's leaning towards or above 90 minutes to play. So yeah, sadly, it's not going to be one for my collection. It's not going to be sticking around. However, under the right circumstances, I would say, give this one a go if you do play those kind of next level Gateway Plus games. This is certainly a decent one that I can't really fault in that respect. Some nice production here, a cool theme, love the way everything looks, but yeah, the gameplay itself is just not quite right for me at this time, which is a shame, because this was certainly one that I was hotly anticipating and eager to play for a long time. So those are my final thoughts on Gutenberg.